Sometimes a lot of engineers realize early on in their careers that school, while it was important to get their technical education, it really only provided like a foundation for them, right? So how should these early career engineers kind of approach these first few years of their, quote unquote engineering residency, the on the job learning period, before they come licensed? What do you recommend in those years?
Structural engineering can be very overwhelming when you come out taking a couple of classes in college. You take a semester of concrete and steel. So we definitely let them know that that's not uncommon, that feeling they have, but it just definitely takes time to go through and learn.
Your civil engineering degree gave you a great technical education, but didn't teach you about leadership in civil engineering or people skills, right? Or how to navigate the different ladders that you're going to go through in your career. But my two guests today are going to help you do just that. In today's episode, I'm joined by Gregory Johnson, licensed professional engineer, PMP, water discipline leader at Colliers Engineering and Design, and Richard Maloney. Rich is a licensed PE, regional discipline leader for the Bridges and Structures Division at Colliers Engineering and Design. We're going to talk about a whole bunch of things related to developing your leadership skills as a civil engineer, how to be well-rounded, how to interact with people, how to respectfully challenge people that are senior to you, all the things that you need to do to be successful as a civil engineering leader. And I'm so excited to share this episode with you. Now, before I jump in with Greg and Rich, I do want to tell you about AEC PM Connect, a series of in-person events that we've created at EMI for AEC project managers and the leaders who develop them. If you want to stay on top of PM trends, elevate your team, and deliver strong project results, these full-day events are built for you. We're coming to New Jersey this June and Kansas City this October. You can learn more and register at aecpmconnect.com. I'm your host, Anthony Pisano, and this is the Civil Engineering Podcast. All right, so today we have two guests for you on the Civil Engineering Podcast. Greg and Rich, who I just introduced from Colliers Engineering and Design. Greg, Rich, welcome to the Civil Engineering Podcast.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks.
Yeah, happy to have you both. So we're going to start off by asking each of you to kind of briefly introduce yourselves, kind of how you got started in civil engineering, which I think is always interesting to ask the guests. And Greg, why don't you go first, please?
Yeah, so I think like most engineers, I was attracted to engineering because as a kid, I liked tinkering with things. I was good at math and science. I think if you talk to most engineers, it may be the same story. And I like building things, so I became a structural engineer. I graduated school and I got into the very specific thing that I do because when I graduated, the economy was not doing so great. And the job that I could get was designing hydroelectric power plants, which is a little bit on the weird side, which you'll see as we go on.
Okay, that's cool. Rich, how about you?
Yeah, a very similar story, actually. I guess when I was applying to college, you had to pick a major. So through the process of elimination, I was going through it. And again, good at math. My friends just called me MacGyver growing up. So again, started tinkering with things. So really, engineering just kind of was the last major standing. And 35 years later, I'm still in the industry. But looking back, I think it was definitely the right choice because it was a good fit. It's what I'm good at. I'm good at figuring stuff out in engineering and stuff like that. I mean, typically at home, everybody's always looking at me to figure stuff out.
Yeah,
and it was a natural fit. And
yeah, it makes sense. I think I hear that a lot. And, the interesting thing about that is I'm also a civil engineer, and now I have a daughter who's in college and a son who's going to be going soon. And I'm just thinking to myself, how could you know at like 18 years old that what you want to do in general, right? And what I think the positive thing about civil engineering is there's about a million different things you can do in our industry, right? With a civil engineering degree, which is a big positive as well. And I say this all the time on the podcast. There'll be jobs in civil engineering in a couple of weeks from now that don't exist today, right? With technology and different things that are happening. So I think it is nice that our profession has that flexibility in it, which is awesome. So, Greg, I'm going to start with you here. What leadership traits would you say have had the biggest impact on your career? And, how did you develop those traits, which I know is difficult when we're working on engineering projects?
Yeah, so, for me, I think one of the things I learned from the people that I reported up to, the leaders that I reported up to, and the qualities that I really admired in some of them was, as a leader, you've got to lead, you got to make decisions, but you also need to have that flexibility. A lot of times in engineering, it's problem solving. There's not one way of doing everything. So if it's not necessarily your way, keep your mind open, listen to what the other person has to say. And if there's nothing that's a major flaw, or that, their way could be better than the way you were thinking, just don't make people do things your way just because it's your way. Give people the freedom to do what they can do, and then they'll own it more. And I think, in my experience, they'll do a better job than if you tell them what you want them to do exactly. They'll just be kind of plodding along with, whereas if you give them the freedom to make their own decision and do what they want to do, they own it, and they will take personal pride in it and do a better job overall.
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, what I really like about that mentality is that in the world of engineering, there's about a million different ways to solve the same problem, right? So if we keep telling everybody which way to use, it's not really necessarily leading them or giving them the opportunity to grow and build their skill sets, right? And make mistakes. So I think that that's an important message for technical leaders, is that just because you like doing it one way doesn't mean that it's the only way that it can be done. And in fact, you might find a better way to do it if you let someone else right try something different. So I think it's a good thing for us technical professionals to keep in mind, that we need a little flexibility in leadership, which is important. So, Rich, for you, I know you mentioned the idea of tinkering with things, solving problems, which is something you like. But I think also from the leadership side of things, empathy is something that's really important in the technical fields, right? Really thinking about things from the other person's perspective as a leader. So how can you kind of build that skill up and practice that as a leader while you're still trying to, hold people accountable, right? Like, it's what we have to do in engineering. We have to hold people accountable, but we also kind of need to understand where they're at. How do you kind of balance that?
Well, I think it's good that you share understanding with them. I mean, I see that a lot with young engineers. They come into the real world from college. They got the basics, but they don't know how to do what we're throwing at them, and they're overwhelmed. They got a lot of lack of confidence, and so it's good to just talk to them, let them know you understand, and that it takes time to build that. So as long as they know and understand that, and then one trick I usually ask them is, just think back like a month or two ago. Remember that project you just did the last couple of weeks? Well, a month ago you didn't know how to do that, and now all of a sudden now you do. So you are learning every day, even though you don't realize it. And just let them know that they're being heard, they're being understood, and that they got to be patient. It is developing, even though they don't even see it in their own eyes.
Yeah, I like that a lot. What I like about that is I think people need to help sometimes have their confidence built up, right? Especially recent grads, first
100%.
time project managers, right? Like, you're walking into a project that's pretty volatile, potentially a lot of complex situations, different stakeholders. And it's nice for your supervisor to be able to say, hey, listen, you did great on the last project. I
Right.
have confidence in you on this one. It may not seem like a lot for someone, but for that person, it certainly can be a lot in helping them, you know, push themselves to say, hey, I can handle this type of thing. Cause I think that that can be pretty, debilitating for a less experienced professional.
100%. Yes. Yeah, they get
Yeah,
overwhelmed. So you want to definitely build up that confidence.
absolutely.
Keep
Absolutely.
that.
That's a good one. So Greg, going back to you, we know that communication is huge in our industry, right? It can really make or break when you have a complex engineering project with all these different parties that I just mentioned. So how can you make sure that your team members, understand the project goals, the scope, their role in the project, the bigger picture, and not get so locked in that they lose some of that?
Right. And I would say communication is a difficult thing. Hear me out. It's not a one size fits all. And I kind of equate it to, if you think about a report that we might write, it has an executive summary. Some people only read the executive summary because that's all the information they need. Some people read the whole body of the report because they need that level of detail. And then some people dive into the appendices where they really need to get totally into the weeds and into the minutia. So it's balancing how much information do you dole out to everyone on the team? Because the last thing I want as a guy that's trying to run a business is to have 50 people sitting in a 3-hour meeting that they need about 2 minutes of that meeting. So it's I've had over my career where I've overshot and undershot that. And it's like everything else that we do as professionals, you course correct and learn over your career. And that's just one of those things where it's kind of you have to figure it out and dole out that information as it makes sense. Because again, and then the other thing is you don't want to bring 50 people to a client meeting because they'll say, I'm paying for all these people. So I think as a younger engineer, that's one of those things that you need to also understand is that you can't be involved in everything, but certainly come by and ask, because that impression that we're giving of we're trying to be good stewards of the money that you're paying us. So
Yeah, that's good stuff. I mean, I think we do a lot of project management training at EMI, and we always focus on the communication work styles because everyone communicates slightly differently. And to Greg's point, you could have someone who is not going to be able to receive the information potentially the way that you're communicating it to them, and you have to be aware of that. I give this example a lot. I probably said this on the podcast in the past, but I'm an engineer, and I'm kind of more big picture. My wife is an engineer, and she's very analytical. So at the dinner table, it's like, how was your day today? And my wife wants to go from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. and give me like the step-by-step day. And I'm just thinking to myself, I'm looking for 2 sentences type of thing, But again, and that could be frustrating for someone like me. But then on the flip side, when I give her my two-sentence summary of my day, she's going to ask me at least 30 questions, right? Because she's looking for all that information. So
yep.
I think that's an important message for those of you out there listening. You really want to, become a good communicator. And I agree with Greg. It's like it's people say it all the time, but it's a very complicated thing, right? There's no calculator where you punch some numbers in and you become a good communicator, right? So I think a big piece of it is just understanding that you need to really think about that person's communication style and how you can meet them where they are to get the right information to them. So I think that's a really good message.
Yeah, right. And I'll glom on, which is some people like calling people on the phone or talking in person.
Yep.
Some people email. Some people IM. Frankly, back when Rich and I started, it was either you picked up the phone and talked to them or you sent a letter.
Yeah.
So
Right.
a lot more communication styles now and more to come, I am sure.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point because I always like to say there's more avenues of communication, which can make it easier to communicate with someone, but it's also more to manage, like as a project manager, as a leader. So now you're dealing with all these different channels, which just can be more stressful, can be more complicated, of course. So, Rich, I'm going to go back to you here. So for these early career engineers, right, they're navigating the first few roles in their careers. What is a good way for them to respectively suggest new ideas or maybe challenge assumptions of a more senior person, in a respectful way so they could still continue to learn, but they can also provide some input and some value?
I think you said the key word there, respectful. I mean, you want to come at it being curious, like you want to ask questions in a learning way, but definitely you want to be respectful. What I see a lot with young people is they rush and answer, they got it all figured out. Well, there's a reason things have always been done, a way they've been done with history and experience. So I usually tell them you got to step back and look at the big picture. Are you sure that quick answer you came up with is the right one? I mean, step back, think it through, and then ask out of curiosity and listen to your superiors. And it's not that the old way is always right, but it's definitely there's usually a reason why we get there. So definitely come at it with the right approach. Like I said, be humble and be respectful. But I mean, I do a lot of things old school wise. I do have a lot of young engineers that are bringing new stuff to me where we have improved methods and efficiencies. So, I mean, it's a two-way street. I mean, the senior principal or managers also has to have an open environment where young people can make suggestions. I mean, the best team is when everybody collaborates. You don't want a one-way street. You want a two-way street here. So you're basically be humble, be curious, be respectful.
Yeah, I like that. And I think also what Rich said though is important from the leadership side of it too is you need to create that kind of culture or atmosphere where someone is willing to maybe challenge an assumption or, bring an idea to the table. Because if they're not comfortable, they're not going to say anything, which is not a very collaborative workspace.
Correct.
But on the flip side, I might want to say something like, hey, Rich, I'm curious as to why we do it this way instead of this way, right? As opposed to saying like, hey,
Right.
why don't we just do it this way type of thing or something like that. So there's definitely ways to approach it to make sure that you are, humble and respectful.
Correct.
And so I think it's kind of a two-way street there for both the leader and the team members to be involved.
Absolutely.
So, Greg, we mentioned earlier that civil engineering offers a lot of different career pathways within the civil kind of realm, if you will. What do you recommend to kind of new or up and coming engineering professionals in the civil space that are trying to figure out the area of the profession that they want to kind of live in ultimately and get to?
Right. So I guess in my head, it's the only way to know what you like is to try different things, unless you are certain that you like something, in which case go for it. But don't be afraid to take an assignment that may not be exactly what you want to do. You also have to realize that sometime that's going to happen in your career because, sometimes that's the work that we have. So you have to come to work and do it. There's a reason that you actually get paid to come to work. It's not always what you want to do. Sometimes it's what your boss wants you to do. So don't be afraid to try new things. Talk around with your peers and your mentors and the other people you work with or that you know, or join a society like ASCE or something and talk around with those people, find out what they do, and then kind of decide on your own what you seem to like. I mean, I think both Rich and I got involved with a certain kind of structural engineering, doing things that are non-standard that both of us really enjoy and thrive on. It's something new every day. And that's the part of civil engineering that I love, but mixed in with what I do is water resources and geotechnical and all kinds of other things. It's also don't let yourself get pigeonholed into doing one thing unless it's really what you want to do. I find it keeps my day-to-day job interesting by being able to get involved in all kinds of different kind of sub-disciplines of the civil engineering discipline, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's an example even between Rich and Greg here in that you both you do structural engineering, but you're doing it on different types of projects and different disciplines, right? So even within like your discipline of civil engineering, there can be variation in there. And I think that's what's important is trying different things. I mean, when I was in school as a civil engineer, I wanted to be a structural engineer because it sounded cool to me, right? I ended up in land development or site development, but I didn't know what that was until I had an internship in senior year because I didn't really have a class on land development. So again, it's trial and error. You're not locked into anything, right? So if you do start doing structural or geotech or whatever it is, doesn't mean you can't change, which is a nice feature of working for like a multidisciplinary organization like a CED, right? But I think that's another thing to keep in mind, right? Don't be like, oh, I made the wrong decision. I'm doing this and I can't switch. You can always switch. The engineering degree is very powerful, in my opinion. You have a lot of flexibility with that degree. You've learned a lot of good analytical thinking skills. So you have to try different things. And I think one thing I will say is I do think when you take a job, if you, in the beginning of your career, if you are able to take work at a company that has some different options, it can provide a nice runway for you to be able to try different things. I even know some AEC firms that have like rotational programs for recent graduates, right? So they can try different departments for a few months because they get it, right? Like you don't know if you're going to love that and stay there forever. So just a couple of things to consider if you're in that space or you're getting into that space is that you're not married to something. And sometimes the company that you do select might give you some different options for being able to kind of spread your wings a little bit, if you will.
Right. And I'll add that to me, I find the advantage, what you want to do is as a employer, you want to find the thing that person wants to do, because that person is going to want to keep doing that. They're going to want to keep getting better doing that. It's going to make them happy. And ultimately, it's better for both sides. So if you're doing something that you really don't want to do, talk to somebody and see if you can change that. You know, like I said before, though, it's not always going to be fun and games. Sometimes you have to do something.
Sure.
But if you're doing it long term, then I think maybe you should talk to somebody.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. There's been a lot of research actually that suggests that when someone's doing something that they really like, I mean, the results tend to be better, right? Yeah, but for obvious reasons, but it is an important thing. And Rich, just keeping on this kind of pathway of these
Yes.
early career engineers, sometimes a lot of engineers realize early on in their careers that school, while it was important to get their technical education, it really only provided like a foundation for them, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So how should these early career engineers kind of approach these first few years of their, quote unquote engineering residency, the on the job learning period, before they come licensed? What do you recommend in those years?
Well, the first thing I usually tell my young engineers is that engineering, especially structural engineering, is a very complex field. And it takes, I'm just estimated about 5 years before a young engineer becomes confident with taking on new tasks so they feel like they can do themselves, that they know how to make the right judgment of how to tackle it. So they're definitely in that apprentice period where you're learning and going through, and it's normal. Again, getting back to the confidence, I mean, structural engineering can be very overwhelming when you come out taking a couple classes in college. You take a semester of concrete and steel, then you're thrown out into the real world. So we definitely let them know that that's not uncommon, that feeling they have, but it just definitely takes time to go through and learn this stuff. And that you do have support here at the company that are going to get you through that. Hopefully your peers and your supervisors and managers are going to give you the tools, tell you how to do it, tell you where to look for stuff, ideally give you a sample from a previous job, and kind of send you off on your way so you can learn that little piece of the project and you can build from there. But they got to know they're not going to figure it all out in a week or a month. It literally takes 5 years, which is about the time you're ready for your PE, your professional engineer's exam. Is 4 years then. So it kind of aligns with that theory of it takes a while, that the first 4 or 5 years of engineering is definitely could be considered an apprentice, just like a residency with med school or the like. So
Yeah, I think that's really the word that Rich used there that I think is a great word to frame it out with, the apprentice idea, because ultimately when you are coming out of school, you got to work depending on the state you're in. Typically it's like 4 years, 3 to 4 years. You got to get your experience before you could sit for the PE exam. And you're supposed to do that under a licensed PE, right? Which is kind of like an apprenticeship model. You're working under a PE, you're learning from them, they're mentoring you, they're guiding you. And then when you're ready, they can sign for you and you can go ahead and take that exam. And so I really think that that's a great way for you to think about it. For those of you early career engineers, it's really, I like to say, you're trying to be a sponge, right? You're soaking up all the knowledge you can,
absolutely.
you're soaking up all the information you can, you're learning from others and preparing yourself to get that PE, and then to kind of like go into the next stage of your career, which might be in project management or, leadership or whatever that next step may be. But, you probably can learn more from the leaders in your organization than you probably learned, in other courses, at least around like the project side of things and the people side of things effectively.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, what you learn in college, it's all the textbooks. It's a very simple, straightforward problem. You get into the real world and nothing's that simple.
Right.
You can't just go to your textbook and have the solution. You got to use your head. You got to figure out how to adjust for things.
Right. Yeah.
So every job's got a curveball, and that's where the experience comes in. But they learn it. They're learning every day, like I mentioned earlier. They just don't realize it.
Yeah. And I think the curveball that you mentioned is probably very much related to what Greg spoke a little bit earlier, was all the different people you're dealing with and the different communication work styles, right? Because in class, you're solving a problem, you're getting something right or wrong, or it's black and white, right? But there's no stakeholders involved, right? There's no politicians involved, or, and agencies involved and other things that are happening. The public's citizens on the property next door calling you up, right? So
Budgets.
budgets,
Yeah.
right? Schedules, critical
Yep.
path, etc.
Yeah.
You can solve a project network diagram in your construction management class, but it's not the
Yeah.
same thing when someone's saying like, I got a lot of money on the line here type of thing. So
What?
it's just a different level of pressure, but obviously some of the stuff that I think Greg and Rich have been talking about can really help you as you start to build up for that. So Greg, I want to go back to what you said before, where, sometimes an engineer can find themselves working on projects that maybe they're not happy about. It's not a good match for them. And they can get into this little bit of a stagnation part of their career, a down part of their career. What would you recommend to someone in that situation, and how they can kind of stay motivated to keep growing and try to like get themselves through that situation? I think it happens a lot in our industry.
Right. I would say, I think it depends on how long that period is. Like I said, every now and then you're going to have to do something that you didn't like, because that's the type of work we have. I think if it goes on, so it's not a very short-term blip, right, where you just accept it and do it without saying anything, goes past that, the first thing I would do is kind of talk to your supervisor, your mentors, say, look, can I try something else, and that kind of stuff. If you really are going to be doing that, then I would look at it as a challenge, right? We kind of all made it through engineering school. Did we like every class that we had in engineering school? I certainly did not. And you have to take the good with the bad. Hopefully there's more good than bad, but understand that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. But if you really are stagnating and you are not happy, I think you really have to talk around and see if there's something else you can do. Just because, like I've said before, if you're not happy doing your job, I don't think you're going to be doing a good job, and that's to nobody's advantage, especially you. And as an engineer, you have to look out for number one. It's a joke, but it is. Number one is
Yeah.
you. I'd say, unfortunately, it's deal with it for a little bit, and then if it gets bad, and nothing happens, then talk to somebody and potentially do something else. Whether that's in the same firm. A lot of firms have where if you're not happy where you are, that firm has invested a lot in you. Don't forget that.
Right.
They've invested a lot, and it's to their advantage to say, you don't like what you're doing. Maybe we have another spot that you'd fit in better. So absolutely speak up and don't get discouraged.
Yeah, I had a manager who always used to tell me the squeaky wheel gets the oil, and he was right. I mean, it's sometimes it's easier said than done when you're younger, but I mean, it's a good point to drive home. And I tell you a quick story about myself. I started doing surveying, land surveying. I was in high school, I was in college, and I got an internship. And I'm thinking to myself, oh, this civil engineering is going to be so cool. I'm so excited. And they stick me out in the field with this rod, and I got pricker bushes that are surrounding me, and it's 100 degrees. I got poison ivy, and I'm telling my parents like, this engineering thing isn't as cool as it sounds like it is. But ultimately, when I did go into civil engineering and I got into the office to do design work, I really had a really good clue of what was going on in the field because I saw a lot of things being built and I knew how they were laying it out. So I think to Greg's point, there's going to be some rough situations, things that you're not crazy about on part of the process of your career. And sometimes you just got to go through those things because you're going to learn in those situations. But other times I agree, you got to speak up and you got to see if you can make a change and try something different. And again, that's the thing. Like I said before, you're not married to anything here. You can flex. I mean, your engineering degree, I think, gives you a lot of flexibility, and that's a benefit of you having it and going through the rigorous curriculum that you went through. All right. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to put the guys on the civil engineering career hot seat to wrap us up with a couple of rapid fire questions. Won't be as hard as the PE exam, I promise. But so we'll be right back with the guys.
Strong project outcomes need skilled managers and competent leaders. EMI's corporate training delivers expert-led courses in project management and people leadership, plus industry-recognized certification and exclusive premium content to take your team even further. Elevate your team's leadership capabilities today. Visit engineeringmanagementinstitute.org and click on corporate training.
All right, we are back with Rich Maloney and Greg Johnson from Colliers Engineering and Design. Happy to have them with us. And now we're going to wrap up by putting them on our hot seat. All right, so Greg, I'm starting with you. First question. Do you have any specific rituals that you practice every day? For example, it's a morning routine, a lunchtime routine, just something that you do consistently that has helped you in your career.
Rituals, no. I would say, especially in my position, what I have is I always maintain that open door policy, and I make it a point where if somebody calls me, I don't just ignore them. I pick up the phone, I answer them. You email me, I email you back. I'm not infallible, though. I get a lot of emails, and occasionally I miss some, and it may take me a little bit to get back. But I also, I think about the time when I was new in my career, and I really appreciated the mentorship, and I appreciate mentoring people. So I try to make myself as available as possible doing that. And that's really what keeps me going, doing what I do. It's the people that I work with and the excitement of the projects.
That's great. So building up that kind of habit of responsiveness and engaging people, that's great. Rich, how about you? Habits, rituals, practices, something you do regularly that's helped you in your career? Anything that comes to mind for you?
Again, no real rituals. When I get in the morning, I usually take about 5 minutes to myself in the morning just to clear my mind, do non-work stuff, maybe some personal stuff. But then 5 minutes in, I hit that switch. I'm basically off to the races. So I do try to get a lunch break. I mean, it's not good to skip. A lot of times you're busy, but I do try to get 15, 20 minutes where I can put a meal in me. And I do like to take a break now, take a lap, like a walking lap, get a half-mile walk in, clear my mind, put on my headphones or something before the second half starts and
Yeah,
you're off to the
I like
races
that. I
again.
like that too. I like to get out at
So,
lunch, maybe walk around the neighborhood a little bit outside the office just to get my head cleared a little
yeah,
bit. But
just a little bit because it's going to start all over again.
that's for sure.
Uh,
All right. So, Rich, I'll stay with you on this next one. Is there a book, an author, a framework, a philosophy, something that you encountered during your career that kind of stuck with you and you've kind of leaned on it?
I mean, the best book I probably read as a leader is a book I learned about called Good to Great by
Jim
Jim
Collins?
Collins.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is a pretty popular book, and it talks about the traits of a good leader, being humble, and also talks about developing a good team, getting the right people on the bus, and then everybody's got to find the right spot in the bus. So it's really about making sure you got the right team that can go far. But it starts with having the right people, and then putting people to do what they're good at. Somebody's is better at a certain task than another. And you kind of shuffle the deck to where everybody fits into the right seat. But before becoming a leader, and this is kind of a little crazy, but when I was I guess down in my 20s and learning, I used to bring the codes home just to try to learn what's out there in the codes and where everything was, what was in there. You don't really learn that stuff in college. And I got thrown into the real world. And I mean, we learned the concrete and steel code, but the building code was a big factor in the stuff we were doing. We were doing very diverse engineering. So I literally would bring it home. I'd read like a different chapter every week or something, just to understand what's out there, the different aspects. So you don't have to remember it. You just have to know that, yeah, I read that somewhere. I know where to look and find it. So like the timber code, you don't learn timber in school. You don't learn masonry. Just going through that to see what's there. So when it came my way, I kind of knew exactly the direction to start.
That's great. No, I love
A
that.
little awkward, but it paid off.
Well, I think knowledge can be a big advantage, right? If you take the
Huge.
time to, educate yourself. And I think as a civil engineer, I always like to tell civil engineers being well-rounded is really helpful, right? Your
Correct.
soft skills, your technical skills, the codes. You're in a conversation with a client. If you have read the code, you may be able to say something to them like, wow, Rich really knows his stuff. This is the company we got to go with, or, something like that.
Yeah.
But I think educating yourself is a great thing that should happen throughout your career, of course.
No, you said well-rounded, and one thing I've gone into being a multidiscipline manager.
Yeah.
All the projects we have, we're pulling in survey, geotech, permitting, MEP. So it's good to have a little bit of knowledge of everything they're doing, so you can manage your job properly. You know what needs to be done. There's not gaps. Sometimes when you get a person that's just thrown in that type of multidiscipline role, they don't know what they're missing. And there's gaps in the scope, and then all of a sudden we got to do that, but it's not in anybody's scope. Well, where are we getting the money from? So it's good to build that as you go through your career.
Yeah.
Have a little bit of knowledge about everything. So if you want to become a multidiscipline engineer.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. Yeah, if someone from the geotech department gives you something, you could read it and have somewhat of a knowledge of what's going on and be able to have a conversation with it or something along
Correct.
those lines. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Greg, how about you? Anything that stuck with you and that you read or consumed or?
I would say as Rich is talking, I was thinking about one of the books that I read. It has nothing to do with civil engineering, but it's engineering in general. Kind of help understand kind of big picture things. There's 2 books. One is a super geeky book, which I'll talk about second. The first book that I read is called Skunk Works, and it's about the Lockheed Martin engineers that built the U-2, the Blackbird, and the stealth aircraft, and what they went through and the challenges they have. And the Blackbird is used to be the fastest plane ever built. There's NASA built one that was faster, but that plane on the ground, you put fuel in it and it leaks out because it goes so fast, the atmosphere heats it up, and then it fits together.
Wow.
So you think about the engineering challenges that team had. It was just fascinating to me as an engineer to read that and how they overcame all the different challenges that they had. One of the other things, so I told you about the plane that leaks. The other thing, they were looking for, how do I keep the components lubricated in the aircraft because it's so hot? And they thought they had the answer. They ordered this lubricant, and it came, and it was a brick, because at room temperature, it was a solid. right? So how did they overcome that? It was fascinating. And then the second book, my son read it, and he must be a bigger geek than I am, which is called The Grid, and it's about the energy grid. And it's just another thing that is just it's a very fascinating thing. The little piece on the energy grid that I think is pretty cool is as soon as you generate electricity, it has to get used, other than the batteries that we're talking about for all the renewables. But when it hits the grid without all these batteries and pump storage and things like that, if you don't use it, it breaks the grid. So it's a huge balancing act, and that's why this whole battery and pump storage and all this other stuff is such a big thing now, because
Yeah.
renewables you can't control as much.
Right.
But it just those things that are not purely what I do, but are engineering in general, and just the things that engineers have been able to accomplish and overcome is fascinating to me.
Yeah, that's interesting. All right, last question I got for you guys, and I'll start with you on this one, Greg. We call it the civil engineering career elevator advice question. So if you get into an elevator with an up-and-coming civil engineer, you got about 30, 40 seconds to give them career advice from your career. What would you tell them in those 30 to 40 seconds that you have with them? Greg?
What I tell that person, which is what I tell everybody, is, especially if you're early on in your career, find something that you like to do that excites you. Find that passion, because you're going to be doing this for a long time. And if you don't like it, it is not good for you. Find something that you love to do, and that'll make you happy, and you'll be happy for it.
Awesome.
Simple as that.
Rich, how about you?
I stole my answer right out of my mouth. I mean, I said this to my kids as they were graduating high school and college. I've been doing it a long time. You definitely want to find out what you like, what's your passion, what are you good at. Don't worry about the money. Find out what you got to good at, because you're going to be doing it every day. And I mentioned the bus before. You want to find the right bus, the right seat for you, so that you're happy. And in engineering, you definitely want to be a sponge as well, because engineering is every day. It's a learning experience.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
You know what? And the nice, I'm glad we're ending off with both of those answers, because really a lot of that stuff that you both mentioned in the elevator, so to speak, is stuff that we talked about throughout the episode, really,
Yes.
right? We talked about the rotational programs, the different things that you can do, right? The mentorship, the being a sponge, the apprenticeship, Rich brought that up, which was really good. So, all right, well, listen, Greg Johnson, Rich Maloney, Colliers Engineering and Design. Guys, we know how extraordinarily busy you are. We really appreciate you spending some time with us here on the Civil Engineering Podcast. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much. Take care.
We'll see you.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with both Greg and Rich. I mean, these guys have a lot of years of experience as civil engineering leaders, and I think what they kind of poured out today is just a lot of great wisdom that we can take and use as we grow our civil engineering careers. If you enjoyed the conversation, please subscribe to our channel here. We put out videos like this on a regular basis to help civil engineers become better managers and leaders. I'll see you next week.